2:15 in the morning. Over the jagged peaks of the Zagros Mountains in central Iran, a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber moved silently through the freezing night air. The aircraft was 300 miles inside sovereign territory. This was not a routine intelligence flight. It was a live mission with an experimental payload. The question for the two pilots was not whether they were being watched. It was why the Iranian air defense network remained completely silent. The cockpit was bathed in the soft green glow of multifunction displays. Major Elias Thorne sat in the left seat. His call sign was Reaper 01. He adjusted the throttles with a gloved hand. The four General Electric engines were dialed back to a whisper. Below them, the world was a void of black granite and hidden valleys. Beside him, Captain Marcus Vane checked the mission clock. He was the mission commander. His focus was on the weapons bay. They were carrying 12 experimental non-kinetic cylinders. These were not bombs. They were sophisticated electronic seeds. The goal was to plant them near the hardened research facility at Isfahan. The mission commander spoke over the internal intercom. "Major, we are 4 minutes from the release point. Everything is green. The terrain following radar is silent." Thorne nodded. "Copy. I have the aircraft. We are on the rail." The B-2 was invisible to the naked eye and nearly invisible to radar. Its flying wing design was a masterpiece of physics and engineering. For 3 hours, they had navigated through the gaps in the Iranian sensor web. They had used the mountains to mask their approach. But the silence from the ground felt heavy. It felt deliberate. The Iranian air defense network was one of the most dense in the world. It was a mix of Russian-made S-300 batteries and indigenous long-range sensors. Normally, the electronic warfare suites would be chirping with distant search pulses. Tonight, the displays showed a flat line. It was as if the entire country had turned off its eyes. 2:20 in the morning. The aircraft reached 32,000 feet. The air was thin and stable. The B-2 Spirit was now within striking distance of its target. The facility at Isfahan was buried deep under layers of reinforced concrete. The mission was to drop the seeds in a precise pattern around the perimeter. Once active, they would create a digital map of every subterranean cable and fiber optic line. The mission commander looked at his screen. "Starting the sequence. Doors opening in 10 seconds. "Copy," Thorne replied. "Keep it steady. I am holding the heading." The massive bay doors beneath the aircraft rotated open. It was the only moment the bomber was truly vulnerable. For a few seconds, its radar cross-section would bloom like a flower. Thorne watched the threat indicator. He expected a sudden surge of energy from the ground. He expected the scream of a lock-on warning. Nothing happened. The 12 cylinders dropped into the dark. They fell away in a tight, choreographed sequence. Small parachutes deployed to stabilize their descent. They would impact the soft earth around the facility and bury themselves 4 feet deep. Vane watched the confirmation lights. All seeds are away. Doors closing. We are clean. The B-2 banked gently to the west. The egress route would take them back toward the Persian Gulf. They were halfway through the mission. They had penetrated the most defended airspace in the region without a single radar pulse touching them. Thorne let out a slow breath. That was too easy. Why are they not looking for us? Vane did not answer immediately. He was watching the signal intelligence display. Maybe they are not looking for us, Elias. Maybe they are waiting for something else. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 2:26 in the morning. 7,000 feet below the Spirit, the seeds began their work. The 12 cylinders had buried themselves in the dry earth around the Isfahan facility. Inside each casing, a small lithium thionyl chloride battery activated. A microscopic antenna extended just inches above the soil, disguised as a piece of scrub brush. They did not broadcast. They listened. They were designed to intercept the low-frequency vibrations of underground power transformers and the electromagnetic leakage of high-speed data cables. In the cockpit of the B-2, Captain Vane watched his tactical data link. A series of soft blue icons appeared on his secondary display. The seeds are linked, Elias. They are forming a daisy chain. We are receiving the first packet of data. Thorne looked at the icons. How does the signal look? Vane adjusted a dial. Clean. They are tapping into the facility's internal power grid. We are seeing the heartbeat of the entire complex. But there is a secondary effect. The seeds are creating a localized interference field. It is subtle. It looks like atmospheric noise. 2:28 in the morning, 500 miles to the north, at the Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Center, the atmosphere was far from quiet. The center was a hardened bunker located beneath the streets of Tehran. It was the brain of the Iranian Integrated Air Defense System. Dozens of technicians sat behind curved consoles, monitoring feeds from every radar site in the country. Captain Arash was the senior controller on the night shift. He was a veteran of 10 years. He knew the electronic signature of his country like he knew the back of his own hand. He leaned forward, squinting at a long-range Resonance NE radar feed. "Sergeant," Arash said. His voice was calm but focused. "Check the gain on the Isfahan sector." "I am seeing a haze." The sergeant tapped a sequence into his keyboard. "Captain, I see it. It is not a contact. There is no velocity, no altitude. It looks like ground clutter, perhaps a localized sandstorm." Arash shook his head slowly. "The weather reports show clear skies over Isfahan. The humidity is 12%. There are no clouds. This is not weather. It is too rhythmic. Could it be a technical fault in the array?" the sergeant asked. Arash did not answer. He watched the green haze on the screen. It was pulsing. It was as if the ground itself was breathing in the radio frequency spectrum. He picked up a black telephone. "Get me the commander of the Isfahan battery. Ask him if his local search radars are seeing any anomalies." 2:30 in the morning. Inside the B-2, the situation changed instantly. A sharp, high-pitched tone rang through the pilot's headsets. On the threat warning receiver, a yellow diamond appeared. It was moving. "We have a search pulse," Thorne said. 6 o'clock, long range. Vane checked the signature. "That is a Russian-made S-300. It is a big bird search radar. They are not locking us yet. They are just scanning the sector. They know something is wrong." Thorne tightened his grip on the control stick. The aircraft was still invisible, but the sky was no longer empty. The Iranian network was waking up. The silence was over. "Reaper, 01 to control," Vane said, into the long-range satellite radio. "The package is delivered. We are entering the egress phase. Be advised. The local grid is showing increased activity. The response from the American carrier strike group in the Arabian Sea was immediate. Copy. Reaper. We see the surge. You are cleared for the western exit. Watch your back." Vane looked at the blue icons from the seeds. The data was flowing in, but beneath the blue icons, a new series of red dots began to blink. 1, 2, 10, 20. "Elias," Vane whispered. "The seeds. They are not just listening anymore. They are triggering a response we did not anticipate." A single red light flashed on the master caution panel. The Iranian network had stopped searching. They had found something. 2:31 in the morning. The B-2 Spirit banked 10 degrees to the west. The aircraft was now moving toward the egress corridor. Major Thorne kept the flight path tight. He stayed within the radar shadows of the mountain ridges. But on the mission commander's console, the data from the seeds was changing. The blue icons were no longer just tracking power lines. They were pulsating in a specific, high-frequency rhythm. Captain Vane adjusted his headset. "Major, the seeds are changing frequency. They are emitting a low-power pulse. It is a digital handshake. They are attempting to link with the local cellular towers." Thorne glanced at his secondary flight display. "Is that part of the mission profile?" "No," Vane replied. His voice was tense. "This is an automated escalation. The software is seeking a wider network. It is looking for the Iranian command and control backbone. If it finds it, we are going to leave a massive electronic footprint." 2:34 in the morning. At the Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Center, Captain Arash stood behind the sergeant's chair. The haze over Isfahan had not disappeared. It had solidified. On the high-resolution displays, the green clutter was now organized into distinct geometric shapes. They looked like aircraft, but they were stationary. They were hovering exactly 4 feet above the ground. "Report," Arash commanded. The sergeant's fingers flew across the keyboard. Captain, the system is identifying 12 distinct signatures. They are broadcasting Iranian military transponder codes. The codes are valid. They belong to the local garrison. Arash felt a chill. That is impossible. We have no aircraft on the ground in those positions. It is a ghost in the machine, a cyber attack. It is worsening, the sergeant said. The signatures are now moving. They are sliding across the map at 500 knots, but the physical radar arrays see nothing. Only the digital network is reporting the contacts. Arash reached for the red telephone. This was no longer a localized glitch. It was a systemic breach. Status Level 1. Wake the sector commander. Tell him our internal network is being spoofed from within the Isfahan perimeter. 2:38 in the morning. Inside the B-2, the threat warning receiver began to chirp. It was a steady, rhythmic sound. It was the sound of a search radar finding its mark. We have a Bavar-373 long-range system, Thorne said. It is active, bearing 300. It is not searching the sky, Marcus. It is looking right at us. Vane looked at the electronic warfare suite. Confirm. They are bypassing the seeds. They have a rough track on our physical location. The seeds triggered a diagnostic check of the entire Iranian grid. When the grid checked itself, it found the hole where we are sitting. The B-2 was no longer a ghost. It was a smudge on a very clean mirror. Thorne pushed the throttles forward. We need more speed. Give me the terrain masking data. I am dropping us down to 15,000 feet. Negative, Vane said. If you drop altitude, the S-300 battery at the coast will have a direct line of sight. Stay high. Stay in the thin air. We have to outrun the logic loop. The radio crackled. It was the American controller from the carrier strike group, Reaper 01. This is Guardian. We are seeing a massive power-up across the entire Iranian western sector. Multiple interceptors are scrambling from Shiraz and Bushehr. You are about to become very popular. Thorne did not blink. Copy, Guardian. We are accelerating to Mach 0.85. Requesting electronic suppression support on the coast. Negative, Reaper. We cannot provide jamming without declaring a hostile act. You are on your own until you hit blue water. Thorne looked at the dark horizon. The sky was still black, but the instruments told a different story. The Iranian network was no longer waking up. It was screaming. 2:39 in the morning. Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar. Inside the Combined Air Operations Center, the atmosphere shifted from routine monitoring to a state of high alert in less than 5 seconds. Brigadier General Sarah Vance stood on the raised command platform, her eyes fixed on the wall-sized master tactical display. The digital map of the Middle East was usually a sparse collection of blue icons representing Allied assets and white icons for neutral traffic. Suddenly, the entire landmass of Iran began to glow. Small red dots appeared in clusters. Then they began to connect. It started along the northern coast of the Caspian Sea and raced southward like a forest fire. Every known Iranian surface-to-air missile site was coming online. Long-range search radars, short-range point defenses, mobile launchers. It was a total system activation. A senior controller shouted from the floor, "General, we have a massive surge. I am counting over 200 separate radar emissions across the Iranian integrated air defense system. They are shifting to high-power combat modes." Vance did not move. "Is it a drill?" "Negative, ma'am," the controller replied. "They are not following training protocols. They are syncing their entire data bus. They are looking for something, and they are looking everywhere." 2:40 in the morning. Inside the Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Center in Tehran, the silence had been replaced by a low, rhythmic thrum of electronic cooling systems, running at maximum capacity. General Salami, the commander of the Air Defense Force, stood at the central terminal. He had just authorized a full-spectrum handshake. This was the highest level of network integration. It bypassed local command filters and linked every sensor in the country into a single, massive eye. Salami looked at the sergeant. "Tell me what the network sees." The sergeant, looked pale in the blue light of his screen. General, the network is reporting thousands of targets. They are appearing and disappearing. Some are over the capital, some are over the mountains. The system is struggling to classify them. It is as if the sky is filled with mirrors. It is a saturation attack, Salami whispered. They are trying to blind us with data. But they are here. Somewhere in that noise, the Americans have a physical presence. He turned to his communications officer. Order every battery to transition to manual override. If a radar pulse gets a solid return, they are cleared to fire. I do not care if the target is not classified. If it has a radar cross-section, kill it. 2:41 in the morning. Inside the cockpit of the B-2 Spirit, the world had turned into a chaotic symphony of warning tones. The threat warning receiver, which usually showed a few isolated diamonds, was now a solid ring of red light. Major Thorne felt the vibration of the aircraft in his seat. The electronic environment was so dense that the air seemed to hum. Marcus, Thorne said. His voice was steady, but his grip on the stick was white-knuckled. The RWR is saturated. I cannot tell what is a search pulse and what is a track. Captain Vane was working the electronic warfare console with both hands. They have gone to full power, Elias. We are being hit by everything, from old Soviet-era Stu-100 pulses to the latest Chinese-made AESA arrays. It is an electronic storm. He looked at the secondary screen. The seeds near Isfahan were still broadcasting, adding to the confusion. But the Iranian network was adapting. It was using the interference to triangulate the source of the noise. We are the center of the storm, Vane said. They are narrowing the search area. Every time we move, the network calculates the delay between the ghost signals and the real returns. They are using our own seeds to find us. A new sound erupted in their headsets. It was a continuous, bone-chilling wail. Lock, Thorne said. I have a solid track, bearing 280. It is a Bavar-373. They are in fire control mode. The B-2 was no longer hiding in the shadows. The entire country of Iran had just turned on every light in the house, and the pilots were standing right in the middle of the room. The morning was no longer quiet. The sky was about to burn. 2:42 in the morning. The Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Center, Tehran. General Salami watched the primary tactical display. It was a digital nightmare. The screen was saturated with hundreds of phantom targets. They were flicking in and out of existence like sparks in a windstorm. Every time the central computer attempted to filter the noise, the ghosts shifted their frequency. Report, Salami said. His voice was low. It was the sound of a man who had seen too many simulations to be easily fooled. The lead technician looked up. Sweat was visible on his forehead. General, the network is attempting to self-correct. But every time it adjusts, the phantoms move. They are mimicking our own sensor logic. It is as if the network is arguing with itself. The central processor is at 98% capacity. Salami stepped closer to the screen. He saw the pattern. The phantoms were not random. They were clustered around the most sensitive radar sites in the western provinces. Every time an Iranian battery pulsed to verify a target, a phantom appeared to provide a countersignal. They are mapping us, Salami whispered. This is not a conventional attack. It is a census. He realized the truth. The American aircraft was a lure. By triggering a total system activation, the United States was recording every hidden frequency. They were cataloging every pulse repetition interval and every physical location of the Iranian defense grid. The seeds on the ground were acting as beacons, forcing the Iranian radars to reveal themselves. General, the technician said. The S-300 battery at Arak is requesting permission to fire. They have a physical return at 32,000 feet. It is intermittent, but it is consistent with a large airframe. They want to engage. Salami looked at the clock. 2:43 in the morning. If he fired, he would reveal the final secrets of his most advanced missile systems. If he did not fire, a hostile aircraft was currently violating his country with impunity. The pride of the nation was at stake, but the technical cost was higher. Cut the automated logic, Salami ordered. Isolate the central processor. Every battery commander is to transition to manual override immediately. The technician hesitated. General, manual override increases the risk of friendly fire. We have 14 and 4 interceptors in the air over Shiraz. Do it, Salami barked. Tell the battery commanders to ignore the digital network. If they see a physical return that matches the flight characteristics of a heavy bomber, they are cleared to engage. We will not be spectators to our own defeat. 2:44 in the morning. Across the country, the electronic chatter changed. The rhythmic pulsing of the integrated network stopped. It was replaced by a jagged and aggressive searching. The batteries were no longer talking to each other. They were hunting individually. They were no longer relying on the corrupted data of the central computer. Inside the cockpit of the B-2, Major Thorne felt the change immediately. The green glow of his threat display shifted. The network just went dark, Marcus, Thorne said. I am not seeing the synchronized pulses anymore. The logic loop has been broken. Captain Vane looked at his electronic warfare display. It is worse, Elias. They are going manual. They have stopped trying to filter the noise. They are just going to saturate the sky with energy. They are looking for a physical reflection, not a digital signature. The threat warning receiver began to stutter. It was no longer a steady tone. It was a series of sharp and violent chirps. Multiple seekers, Vane said. They are not waiting for a perfect lock. They are firing on the approximate coordinates. We have 3 minutes until we reach the coast. We are running out of sky. The B-2 was a $2 billion shadow in a room full of people throwing stones. Eventually, one of those stones would hit. 2:45 in the morning, the edge of the Iranian coast. The cockpit of the B-2 was no longer bathed in soft green. It was a strobe light of crimson warnings. Major Thorne felt the vibration in his spine. The aircraft was heavy. It was a flying wing designed for shadows, not a dogfight. He was pulling the stick toward his chest. The bomber groaned under the stress of a 4G turn. Launch. Launch. Launch, Vane shouted. His voice was a clipped rasp over the intercom. I have 6 plumes. South, southwest. They are coming from the mobile batteries near Bandar Abbas. He looked at the primary flight display. Distance, 12 miles, Vane replied. Closure rate is Mach 4. They are Sayyad 4 interceptors. They are lead calculating our exit. The B-2 was at 32,000 feet. The missiles were screaming upward through the thin atmosphere. On the Iranian ground, the battery commanders were no longer looking for a stealth signature. They were looking for the massive hole in the air, where the B-2's electronic countermeasures were screaming. They were aiming at the silence. 2:45 and 30 seconds in the morning. 500 miles away, General Salami watched the live telemetry from the coastal batteries. The red lines on his screen were converging on a single point over the Persian Gulf. The intercept was inevitable. The mathematics of the engagement were cold and absolute. Impact in 20 seconds, the technician reported. The target is attempting a defensive maneuver, but it is too slow. Salami gripped the edge of the console. This was the moment. The destruction of a Spirit bomber would change the geopolitical map of the world. It would be a total validation of Iranian sovereignty. Confirm kill, Salami ordered. Do not let them reach the water. Inside the B-2, Thorne watched the countdown. 10 seconds to impact. The missiles were 3 miles out. 2 miles. The radar warning receiver was a solid, continuous shriek. The airframe felt like it was being bombarded by invisible hammers. The sheer volume of microwave energy from the ground was heating the cockpit glass. Chaff, Thorne commanded. Deploying, Vane replied. The B-2 released a cloud of glass fibers coated in aluminum. It was a desperate attempt to create a physical decoy. Behind them, the sky blossomed with metallic confetti. The first missile bit on the decoy. It detonated in a massive orange fireball that illuminated the clouds for 50 miles. The shockwave slammed into the B-2, throwing the massive wing into a violent roll. Correcting, Thorne grunted. He fought the flight controls. Where are the others? Still coming, Vane said. 4 missiles remaining. They are ignoring the chaff. They are home on jam. They are riding our own defense signal straight into our nose. 2:46 in the morning. The B-2 crossed the shoreline. Below, the dark, oil-slicked waters of the Persian Gulf appeared through the haze. They were out of Iranian territory, but the missiles did not recognize borders. They were machines of pure momentum, 1 mile out. The pilots could see the glow of the missile motors through the side windows. 4 points of white-hot light. They were perfect. They were lethal. Thorne felt the static in his teeth. The cockpit smelled of ozone. "Everything we have, Marcus," Thorne said. "Flush the buffers. Burn the seeds." Vane hit the final command on the experimental console. The 12 seeds back at Isfahan received the signal via satellite. They did not just pulse, they overloaded. They released their entire battery capacity in a single, massive, electromagnetic burst directed upward, into the Iranian network. The aircraft shuddered, as if it had struck a wall. 2:47 in the morning. The sky over the Persian Gulf. The 4 Syed missiles were less than 800 meters from the B-2 Spirit. Their proximity fuses were armed. Their infrared seekers were locked onto the heat of the bomber's exhaust. In the cockpit, Major Thorne braced for the end. He kept his eyes on the flight instruments, waiting for the flash that would vaporize the airframe. Then, the world changed. The continuous shriek of the radar warning receiver did not just stop, it shattered. The sound was replaced by a low, rhythmic pulsing that sounded like a heartbeat. On the tactical display, the 4 red dots representing the incoming missiles suddenly veered away. They did not just miss, they performed a violent, synchronized turn to the north. They were no longer hunting the B-2. "Status," Thorne barked. Captain Vane was staring at his screen in disbelief. "Elias, I am seeing total sensor inversion. The missiles are no longer receiving guidance from the coastal batteries. They have switched to an internal override. They are tracking a new source." Thorne leveled the wings. "What source?" "There is nothing north of us but the Iranian coastline." Vane adjusted the gain on his radar. "That is the point. The missiles are tracking the fire control radars that launched them. The seeds back at Isfahan did not just burn out. When they overloaded, they sent a high-voltage spike through the Iranian fiber optic backbone. It created a mirrored reflection. To the missiles, the radar towers on the coast now look exactly like a heavy bomber. 2:47 and 30 seconds in the morning. The Khatam Al-Anbiya Air Defense Center. The room was in total chaos. Every screen in the bunker had turned a blinding, brilliant white. The high-capacity servers that managed the national air defense grid were audibly screaming. A thick, acrid smell of ozone filled the air as circuit breakers tripped in rapid succession. General Salami stood frozen. What happened to the link? The lead technician was frantically pulling cables from his console. "General, the system is backfeeding. We are receiving a massive electromagnetic surge through the hard lines from Isfahan. It is a logic bomb. The central computer thinks every one of our own radar sites is an enemy intruder. Shut it down," Salami ordered. "Kill the power to the coastal batteries." "I cannot," the technician shouted. "The manual override has been locked out by the surge. The system is in a self-defense loop. It is targeting itself." On the one remaining functional monitor, Salami watched in horror as the telemetry from the 4 missiles reached its climax. The Syad interceptors, the most advanced weapons in the Iranian arsenal, were diving toward the very radar installations that had birthed them. 2:48 in the morning. On the coast of Iran, 4 massive explosions lit up the shoreline. The radar towers near Bandar Abbas disappeared in plumes of fire and twisted metal. The energy from the missile warheads was focused directly into the sensitive electronics of the batteries. Within seconds, the western sector of the Iranian air defense network was physically and digitally severed from the rest of the country. Inside the B-2, the cockpit was suddenly silent. The threat warning receiver was blank. The sky was empty. Thorne looked at his mission commander. "Did we just do that?" Vane wiped sweat from his eyes. His hands were shaking. The seeds were a two-way street, Elias. We did not just map their network. We used their own nerves to paralyze their muscles. But look at the strike group data. This was not a clean break. He pointed to the long-range sensor feed from the American carrier. A new set of icons was appearing over the horizon. They were not missiles. They were aircraft. Iranian 14 Tomcats and 4 Phantoms were crossing the coast. They had seen the explosions. They had seen their own defenses destroyed. The electronic war was over. The physical war was about to begin. Thorn pushed the throttles to the wall. Guardian, this is Reaper 01. The Iranian grid is down, but the interceptors are hot. We are 3 minutes from international airspace. We need a screen. Now. The response was a single, cold word. Copy. 2:49 in the morning. 10 miles behind the B-2 Spirit. Inside the cockpit of an Iranian 14 Tomcat, Major Qasim looked to his left. He could see the orange glow of the coastal fires reflecting off the canopy of his wingman's aircraft. The data link in his cockpit was dead. The voices of the ground controllers had been replaced by a low, rhythmic buzzing. He was flying in a vacuum of information. Qasim reached for the master arm switch. He flipped the cover and toggled it to the armed position. On his primary display, the ancient but powerful radar of the Tomcat was searching the dark. It was a vacuum tube era system, less susceptible to the digital logic bomb that had destroyed the modern coastal batteries. "I have a return," Qasim said into his mask. "Range 12 miles. Bearing 185. It is faint. It is a ghost, but it is there." His wingman responded immediately. "Confirm. I see the smudge. Major, the coast is burning. They have attacked our brothers. We have the authority to intercept." Qasim felt the weight of the decision. He had no orders. He had no guidance from Tehran. He only had the evidence of the fire below and the Phantom on his screen. He pushed the throttles of the Tomcat into full afterburner. The twin engines roared, pushing the heavy fighter through the sound barrier. 2:51 in the morning. Inside the B-2, the threat warning receiver began to chirp with a new frequency. It was a deep, guttural sound. "That is an AWG-9 radar," Thorn said. "Old school, high power. The Tomcat is painting us, Marcus. He is not using the network. He is using his own eyes." Captain Vane checked the rear-facing sensors. He is closing fast, Mach 1.4. He is inside the launch envelope for a Phoenix missile. If he fires, we cannot outrun it. The B-2 is not a dogfighter. Thorn gripped the stick. "Where is our escort?" 3 miles ahead, Vane replied. They just crossed the maritime boundary. 2:53 in the morning. Was suddenly broken by 4 streaks of white light. 4 F-35 Lightning fighters, launched minutes earlier from the USS Theodore Roosevelt, screamed across the sky at 30,000 feet. They did not come in with their radars active. They moved in total electronic silence, guided by the infrared signatures of the Iranian afterburners. The lead American pilot, Commander Sarah Jester Reed, watched the Iranian Tomcats on her helmet-mounted display. She could see the heat from their engines glowing like small suns. "Guardian lead to Reaper 01, she said. Her voice was a calm, professional contrast to the chaos of the last hour. "We have you in sight. We are crossing your 6. Stay on your heading. Do not maneuver." The F-35 fighters performed a high G barrel roll. They did not move to attack. Instead, they placed themselves directly in the flight path of the Iranian interceptors. They created a physical and electronic wall between the stealth bomber and its pursuers. 2:54 in the morning. Major Qasim saw the new icons appear on his display. His radar was suddenly being jammed by a source he could not identify. The 4 American fighters were now flying, less than 2 miles in front of him. They were so close, he could see the navigation lights on their wingtips. The American commander spoke on the international distress frequency. "Iranian flight. This is the United States Navy. You are approaching international airspace. We are escorting a high-value asset. We are not a threat to your territory. Break off your pursuit immediately, or you will be engaged." Qasim looked at his finger on the trigger. He could see the F-35 in front of him. It was a target, but it was also a warning. Behind that single fighter was an entire carrier strike group. Behind that carrier was the full weight of a superpower. His wingman's voice crackled in his ear. "Major, my radar is locked. "I have the shot. Give the order." Qasem looked down at the coast. The fires were still burning. The anger in his chest was hot. But he was a professional. He knew that the first missile fired would be the start of a war that would consume his country. "Negative," Qasem said. His voice was thick with restraint. "Disengage. We have defended the border. We do not cross the line." The two Iranian Tomcats pulled into a steep, vertical climb. They rolled onto their backs and dove back toward the Iranian mainland, 2:55 in the morning. The B-2 Spirit crossed the invisible line into international airspace. The red lights on the threat warning receiver faded to yellow, then to green. The electronic storm was receding. Thorne let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for an hour. "They turned back, Marcus. They actually turned back." Vane leaned back in his seat. The experimental console was dark. The seeds were dead. The mission was over. They did not want a war today. Elias. "Neither did we." "Maybe," Thorne said, "but we just showed them the front door is unlocked. That is a dangerous thing to know." The morning was becoming still again, but it was a different kind of silence. 2:56 in the morning. Over the dark expanse of the central Persian Gulf, the B-2 Spirit was now 40 nautical miles from the Iranian coastline. Major Thorne eased the pressure on the flight stick. The autopilot engaged with a soft chime. For the first time in 90 minutes, the cockpit was not screaming with electronic warnings. The green glow of the displays felt peaceful, but the air around them was still heavy, with the presence of the 4 F-35 Lightning fighters. The mission commander looked at the fuel gauges. "We are low on the left tank, Elias. That high-speed egress burned through our reserves. We need the tanker at the rendezvous point." Thorne checked the navigation display. "The tanker is at Three Sisters, 20 minutes out. We have enough to get there. But we are not alone in this sky." 3 o'clock in the morning. 500 miles away, on the bridge of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, Rear Admiral Marcus Vance stood at the center of the flag bridge. He was listening to the secure satellite link from the Pentagon. On the main screen, the infrared feed from a Global Hawk drone showed the Iranian coast. The fires at the radar sites were still burning. They were bright white spots against the Black Ocean. The communications officer approached the admiral.
Captain,
"Sir, we have a request for an open-channel bridge-to-bridge communication. It is coming from the Iranian regional headquarters at Bushehr." Vance did not hesitate. "Put it on the speaker. Let the whole room hear it." The voice that came through the speakers was distorted by static, but the English was clear and professional. The Iranian officer spoke with a measured tone. "This is the commander of the Southern Coastal Defense Sector. To the American Carrier Strike Group, you have violated our airspace. You have destroyed our sovereign defense installations. This is an act of war." Admiral Vance leaned over the console. "Commander, this is the United States Navy. We were conducting a freedom of navigation operation in international waters. Your batteries engaged our aircraft while they were in a recognized international corridor. We acted in self-defense to neutralize the immediate threat to our personnel." There was a long pause. The static hissed in the silent room. The Iranian officer spoke again. "Your aircraft was not in a corridor. It was deep over Isfahan. We have the data. We have the proof of your electronic intrusion. You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." Vance looked at his tactical map. The Iranian interceptors had returned to their bases. The immediate danger of a dogfight had passed. "Commander, we are not interested in escalation. Our mission is complete. Our aircraft are returning to base. I suggest you focus your resources on your own internal systems. The situation is contained." 3 o'clock and 10 minutes in the morning. At the Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Center in Tehran, the contained situation felt like a disaster. General Salami walked through the server room. It was filled with white smoke. Technicians were using handheld fans to clear the air. The central logic core of the Iranian defense grid was a melted mass of plastic and silicon. The technician looked up. "General, the damage is systemic. The American seed payload did not just burn the circuits. It rewrote the firmware of the routers. We have to replace every node from here to the coast. We are blind in the western sector. Salami stood in the smoke. He was not angry. He was calculating. They did not drop bombs, Sergeant. They dropped a mirror. They showed us that our most advanced technology is our greatest weakness. They did not come to kill us. They came to humiliate our science. 3:15 in the morning. Inside the B-2, the adrenaline was finally beginning to fade. Major Thorne felt the weight of his flight suit. His neck was stiff from the high G maneuvers. He looked out at the wing of the F-35, flying just 50 feet away. The pilot gave him a quick flash of the navigation lights. Reaper 01 to Guardian, Thorne said. We are approaching the tanker. Requesting fuel transfer. Copy, Reaper, the controller replied. The sky is clear. The Iranian network is still dark. You are in the home stretch. Thorne looked back at the horizon. The sun would be up in a few hours. The world would wake up to news of a localized incident. But only a few men knew how close the spark had come to the powder. The Iranian network was silent, but the silence felt like a breath being held. 3:16 in the morning. Over the central Arabian Sea, the B-2 Spirit approached the rendezvous point. High above the dark water, a KC-46 Pegasus tanker waited. The tanker was a massive shadow against the stars. Its navigation lights dimmed to a faint tactical glow. Major Thorne adjusted the flight controls with minute, precise movements. The fatigue was setting in, but the final phase of the flight required absolute concentration. Reaper 01 to extender, Thorne said. We are in position. Requesting the boom. The tanker pilot responded immediately. Copy, Reaper. We have you on the visual. Stabilizing at 26,000 feet. The boom is coming down. Thorne watched the refueling probe through the overhead glass. The long, telescopic arm of the tanker extended toward the receptacle on the spine of the B-2. It was a delicate dance of two massive aircraft moving at 400 miles per hour. The boom made contact with a metallic thud that vibrated through the airframe. Contact, Vane said. Fuel is flowing. 3:21 in the morning. Inside the B-2, the mission commander began the final purge of the onboard systems. He monitored the data transfer to the secure satellite link. The information gathered by the seeds was now safely stored in the servers at the National Security Agency. The ghost map was complete. Every frequency, every cable run, and every hidden sensor in the Isfahan sector was now a permanent part of the American Strategic Database. Data upload is at 100%, Vane reported, initiating the final wipe of the experimental partition. We are leaving nothing behind but the mission logs. Thorne watched the fuel gauges climb. The lifeblood of the aircraft was being restored. Check the threat receiver one last time, Marcus. I want to know if anyone is still looking at us. Vane scanned the electronic warfare suite. The display was remarkably clean. The Iranian western sector is a total black hole. Elias, they are not even trying to broadcast. They have retreated to landlines and messenger bikes. We effectively blinded a third of their country, with 12 cylinders and a logic loop. 3:25 in the morning. In Tehran, the atmosphere at the Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Center was one of exhausted professionalism. General Salami sat in a small office adjacent to the main floor. He was drinking a glass of tea. He had spent the last 30 minutes on a secure line with the Supreme National Security Council. The decision had been made to downplay the incident. To the public, the explosions on the coast would be described as a technical accident during a scheduled exercise. A colonel entered the office and stood at attention. General, the American aircraft has cleared the Gulf. Our signals intelligence indicates they are refueling south of the maritime boundary. The interceptors have all returned to base. No losses. Salami nodded slowly. And the facility at Isfahan? The local technicians have recovered 4 of the American devices, the colonel said. They are being transported to the laboratory in Tehran for analysis. But the preliminary report says the internal components were destroyed by a thermal charge when the battery overloaded. There is nothing left to reverse engineer. Salami set his tea down. They planned for the capture. They planned for the response. They even planned for our anger. We were a variable in an equation they had already solved. 3:30 in the morning. The B-2 Spirit disconnected from the tanker. Thorn banked the aircraft away, watching the KC-46 disappear into the darkness. The mission was entering its final leg. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, aching weariness. They had been in the air for 15 hours. Guardian to Reaper 01. The carrier controller said, "The corridor is clear. You are cleared to return to base. Good work tonight." "Copy, Guardian," Thorn replied, heading home. The B-2 leveled out at 38,000 feet. The engines hummed in a steady, reassuring rhythm. There were no cheers in the cockpit. There was no celebration. They were two professionals who had survived a brush with the end of the world. The crisis had resolved, not with a bang, but with a silent withdrawal. The lines on the map remained where they were, but everyone involved knew the map had changed forever. 6:15 in the morning, Joint Base Whiteman, Missouri. The massive landing gear of the B-2 Spirit touched down on the concrete runway with a puff of white smoke. Major Thorn and Captain Vane had been in the air for 23 hours. As the aircraft taxied toward a high-security hangar, a fleet of black vehicles waited. This was not a standard recovery team. It was a group of technical specialists from the National Security Agency and the Air Force Intelligence Center. The mission was officially over, but for the analysts in Washington and the commanders in Tehran, the real work was just beginning. 7 hours later, the Pentagon. A group of high-ranking officers and civilian intelligence directors gathered in a windowless room. On the main screen was a three-dimensional rendering of the Isfahan research facility. It was not just a picture. It was a living, breathing map of electronic energy. The lead analyst stood up. "General, the data from the Ghost Map mission is beyond our initial projections. When the 12 seeds overloaded, they acted as a digital die. We tracked the surge as it moved through the Iranian fiber optic backbone. We have now identified every backup command center, every underground data vault, and every redundant power station in the central province." A general leaned forward. "And the Iranian response? They are currently in a state of total internal audit," the analyst replied. "General Salami has ordered a complete teardown of their integrated air defense system. They are physically pulling cables out of the ground. They realize that their Russian and Chinese-built hardware has a fundamental vulnerability to our non-kinetic payloads. They are blind, and they know we are the ones who turned out the lights." 9:30 in the morning. Tehran. General Salami stood on the remains of the coastal radar platform at Bandar Abbas. The charred metal of the S-300 array twisted in the morning breeze. He was surrounded by engineers from the Defense Ministry. They were holding tablets, scanning the rubble for any trace of the American technology. "We found nothing, General," the chief engineer said. "The logic bomb was a software ghost. It utilized the inherent latency in our own network to create the feedback loop. There is no physical evidence to present to the United Nations. To the world, this looks like a catastrophic failure of our own equipment." Salami looked out at the blue water of the Gulf. He knew the Americans were watching him even now, perhaps from a satellite or a high-altitude drone. They did not want to destroy our radars, Colonel. They wanted to destroy our trust in our own machines. Every time a technician looks at a screen now, he will wonder if what he sees is real. That is a deeper kind of defeat than a destroyed building. The strategic fallout was quiet but absolute. The Iranian military spent the next 48 hours in a defensive crouch. They moved their mobile missile batteries. They changed their encryption keys. But the Ghost Map was already etched into the American targeting computers. The shadows had been measured. Inside the debriefing room at Whiteman, Major Thorne sat with a cup of black coffee. He had just finished his final statement. He looked at the mission commander, Captain Vane. "They are calling it a success," Thorne said. Vane nodded. "We got the data. we got the plane home. But think about those Iranian pilots, Elias. They were ready to die for a ghost. In the next war, there might not be anyone to tell them to turn back. The silence in the room was heavy. The high-tech war of the future had been tested. It was cleaner than a bombing run. It was quieter than a missile strike. But the tension it left behind was a weight that no one knew how to lift. The morning was bright over Missouri. The world was still at peace. But it was a peace held together by a very thin thread of digital logic. 3 days later, Washington, District of Columbia, and the streets of Tehran. The incident over the Zagros Mountains was never officially acknowledged by the White House or the Pentagon. To the global press, the night was marked only by vague reports of a localized electrical surge and a brief grounding of commercial flights in the Persian Gulf. But inside the secure, windowless rooms of the National Security Agency, the atmosphere was one of quiet, clinical triumph. The ghost map was no longer an experimental theory. It was a permanent strategic asset. The data harvested by the 12 seeds had been processed by the most powerful supercomputers in the world. The United States now possessed a high-fidelity digital twin of the Iranian integrated air defense system. Every frequency, every router, and every hidden subterranean data path was cataloged. It was a master key to a door that the Iranian military believed was triple-locked. Strategic analysts would later refer to the event as the beginning of the era of cognitive paralysis. The objective was no longer to destroy the enemy's hardware, but to destroy their confidence in what that hardware was telling them. In Tehran, the response was a massive, expensive, and desperate effort known internally as the Iron Purge. General Salami had ordered the immediate replacement of over 4,000 miles of fiber optic cabling and the decommissioning of hundreds of Russian-built radar components. He did not trust the machines anymore. He could not be sure which wires were clean and which were tainted by the American logic bomb. The cost of the rebuild was estimated in the billions of dollars, but the cost to the morale of the Iranian Air Defense Force was immeasurable. The 4 Iranian pilots who had pursued the B-2 into the dark were quietly reassigned to remote border outposts. There were no medals for their restraint and no recognition of the fire they had almost started. They were witnesses to a vulnerability that the state could not allow to be discussed. Major Elias Thorne and Captain Marcus Vane returned to their routine lives at Whiteman Air Force Base. They did not talk about the night the sky turned into a strobe light of crimson warnings. They did not talk about the 4 white-hot streaks of the Sayyad missiles or the ozone-heavy air of a cockpit under electronic siege. They were professionals who had looked into the abyss of a global conflict and seen it blink. The B-2 Spirit sat in its climate-controlled hangar, its dark, serrated skin smooth and indifferent to the history it had rewritten. It was a machine designed for a world where the greatest victories are the ones that never appear on the evening news. Modern warfare had shifted. It was no longer a contest of who could throw the heaviest stone, but who could make the other side believe. The stone was already at their throat. The demonstration of absolute technical superiority had achieved what 40 years of diplomacy had failed to do. It had reinforced a cold, brittle peace through the total elimination of the enemy's certainty. The morning sun rose over the Potomac River and the Zagros Mountains simultaneously, thousands of miles apart. Below the surface of the headlines, the chess match continued. The Iranian network would be rebuilt. The American seeds would be refined. The ghosts would continue to haunt the machines. No missiles had flown to their targets. No ships had been lost. But a line had been crossed, and the meaning of sovereignty had been redefined by a flight of 12 digital seeds. The most powerful weapon in the modern arsenal was not the one that destroyed the world. It was the one that convinced the enemy they had already lost the ability to defend it. The sky was blue. The radars were searching. The silence was back. But it was the silence of a new and terrifying understanding.